It's simple to become lost in the flood of economic data when headlines are full of contradicting information. On one hand, we're told that the economy is thriving, stock markets are at record highs, unemployment bumped a little, but we are down from July's highs, and the GDP is still expanding. However, why does it seem like we're fighting merely to stay up if everything is seemingly going all right? Well, let's examine the causes of this mismatch, including the effects of inflation, growing inequity, and the limitations of conventional economic measures. Now, when we analyze using key indicators, the economic reality presents a quite different picture from how many people perceive it. The figures appear to show that the economy is not only steady, but even doing well at first sight. The gross domestic product has even increased steadily over the last 4 quarters. This steady development is indicative of an economy that is robust and has continued to flourish in spite of many global obstacles. On the other hand, the stock market, which is frequently used to gauge the state of the economy, has been rising to all-time highs. The benchmark S&P 500 index, which is made up of the 500 biggest publicly listed corporations in the United States, has increased by 13.4% so far this year. From changes in monetary policy to geopolitical concerns, the stock market has shown incredible endurance in the face of global market turbulence. From history, a rising stock market is often an indicator that businesses are doing well, that employment is steady, and that the general state of the economy is positive. But still, many people believe that the United States is in a recession. However, a portion of this uncertainty results from an incorrect understanding of what a recession is. Let me break it down. You see, a recession is conventionally defined as 3 quarters in a row with negative GDP growth. The United States momentarily satisfied this technical requirement in 2022, but the economy has recovered with several quarters of growth in a row since then. The United States is not in a recession by most measures of the economy. However, the public believes that the US is in a recession. A recent Harris poll found that even while economic statistics like GDP growth, stock market performance, and unemployment rates do not support this belief, 56% of Americans still think that the United States is now in a recession. People's perception of the economy are shaped by a variety of misconceptions and false information, which causes this gap between perception and reality. The notion that the nation is experiencing a recession in spite of contradictory data is a powerful illustration of how perception may diverge from real economic realities. The performance of the stock market is a significant indicator of misinformation. According to over half of Harris poll participants, the S&P 500 has declined this year. As it happens, the S&P 500 has risen 13.46% so far this year. In a similar vein, 49% of respondents think that unemployment has reached a 50-year high. In actuality, the situation is completely reversed. The unemployment rate is at a historically low 4.2%, significantly lower than the double-digit rates that were observed during the Great Recession or the initial stages of the COVID-19 epidemic. These misconceptions draw attention to a mismatch between the general public's perception and the realities of the economy, which distorts the perception of economic strain. But then, where does inflation come in? One of the biggest economic issues over the last few years has been inflation, which has a direct effect on people's perception of the economy and their personal financial circumstances. Following an extended period of comparatively steady pricing, June 2022 saw a 4-decade high of 9.1% inflation. Many Americans were severely impacted by this sudden spike in the cost of living, which resulted in prices rising for necessities like food, petrol, and housing. There were several things that contributed to the unexpected spike in inflation, including the COVID-19 pandemic's effect on supply chains, geopolitical tensions that impacted energy prices, and rising consumer demand as the economy recovered. Thankfully, inflation has decreased to 2.9% in recent months after cooling off slightly. The Federal Reserve's aggressive interest rate rises, which were intended to curb borrowing and spending, have resulted in this fall. In addition, energy prices have softened from their peaks, and supply networks have steadily stabilized. Many Americans still experience the effects of inflation, despite the fact that it is less than it was during its height. The difference between price hikes and wage growth is one of the key reasons inflation is still a big issue. Since January 2021, the Consumer Price Index has increased by 19.3% over the same period. That average hourly salaries have climbed by 16.1%. This disparity indicates that although workers' incomes have increased, their purchasing power has really declined. People are now discovering that their incomes don't go as far as they used to, which forces many of them to save money or reduce discretionary expenditures in order to pay for necessities. Since any unforeseen expenditure may quickly spiral out of control, the situation feels more dire for individuals who are already living paycheck to paycheck. Regardless of the economy's statistics that point to a booming economy, people feel financially pinched when they witness prices rising faster than their wages. This sense of constraint may result in lower consumer spending, which is a vital engine in economic expansion. People are less inclined to make large purchases like vehicles or appliances, or to spend money on non-essentials like entertainment and eating out, if they feel they have less money to spend. This reduction in expenditure has the potential to impede economic expansion and feed the wild cycle of economic fear. Furthermore, the effects of inflation vary between various demographic groups. Higher percentages of the budgets of lower income households are allocated to necessities like housing, food, and transportation, all of which have seen some of the sharpest price rises. This means that those who are least able to bear the effects of the inflation will suffer the most. These households could still have difficulties even if inflation slows down, since the price of necessities is still higher than it was before the outbreak. Higher income families, on the other hand, are nonetheless impacted by market volatility and worries about the stability of the economy going forward, even if they may not experience the effects as quickly, since they spend a lower percentage of their income on necessities. But that's not all. Conventional economic measures such as GDP and inflation are always employed as the main gauges of the state of the economy, but they have serious drawbacks that might lead to a false impression. For example, the gross domestic product counts the entire value of goods and services generated in a nation, but it does not take into consideration the sustainability of that growth or how this increase impacts people's well-being. The GDP grows in tandem with output, but it does not distinguish between economic activity that rises living standards and those which might have unfavorable long-term consequences. For instance, even though they are more reflective of social issues than actual economic advancement, expenditures associated with cleaning up after an environmental disaster or paying for healthcare during a health crisis both go into GDP. Another often used statistic is inflation. Inflation shows how quickly the cost of goods and services is rising. Although comprehending the increase in the cost of living requires a grasp of inflation, inflation is not without flaws. The cost that most directly impacts individuals, such as housing, healthcare, and education, are frequently left out. The Consumer Price Index and other standard inflation measurements may underweigh or eliminate key prices, giving an inaccurate picture of the underlying financial strain on consumers. Furthermore, inflation does not take quality changes into account. Although price increases brought on by scarcity or increased material prices are not the same as price increases brought on by greater product quality, inflation measurements regard both the same, which may skew consumers' perception of their buying power. Owing to these drawbacks, there is an increasing need for measurements that more accurately reflect an economy's overall health. The Genuine Progress Indicator is one such measure that modifies GDP by taking into account social variables, including crime and leisure time, economic inequity, and environmental costs. An additional illustration is the Human Development Index, which provides a more comprehensive assessment of a nation's economic health by accounting for factors including per capita income, education level, and life expectancy. These indicators show areas that require development beyond just financial growth, providing a more comprehensive view of how effectively an economy is serving its people. Another statistic, in the wrong context, might be deceptive, is the debt to GDP ratio. This ratio gives an overview of a nation's financial health by contrasting its public debt to GDP. High debt to GDP ratios are frequently seen as warning signs that a nation may find it difficult to pay its debts. According to current forecasts, for example, the US federal debt may surpass 181% of GDP by 2053 and reach 135% of GDP by 2034. Even while these figures are alarming, they don't provide a whole picture. A high debt to GDP ratio does not always indicate an urgent crisis. Rather, it is contingent upon the nation's ability to manage and service its debt. the state of interest rates, and the level of investor confidence in the nation's economic prospects. The shortcomings of these conventional economic measures highlights the need for a more thorough method of gauging the state of the economy. Metrics that take sustainability, well-being, and fair resource allocation into consideration give a more realistic view of an economy's performance. They make it possible for the public and decision makers to go beyond the figures and comprehend the bigger picture of how economic policies affect people's lives. If we are to advance towards a truly wealthy and inclusive economic future, we must address these systemic concerns. There is also another angle we should look at. The difficulties facing the American economy are not exclusive to the US, as many advanced economies worldwide are battling comparable problems. For example, the COVID-19 pandemic's after effects, supply chain disruptions, and geopolitical unrest have all contributed to a global spike in inflation. Sharp increases in inflation rates have hit European nations like Germany and the United Kingdom, driving up the cost of living and placing pressure on household budgets. Inflation has also been a major worry in Canada and Australia, leading central banks to tighten monetary policies in an attempt to rein in rising prices. Disruptions to the supply chain has also been a real issue. It has taken some real time to remove the severe industrial, transportation, and logistical bottlenecks that the epidemic produced. And new difficulties have surfaced even as these supply networks are steadily getting better. Global economies and energy markets have been further stressed by geopolitical crises like the war in Ukraine. Energy prices have increased as a result of the conflict, especially in Europe, which depends mostly on Russian gas. The crisis has affected everything from food prices to the cost of industrial output, adding even another level of complication to the already precarious economic recovery. So, as you can see, there is a glaring disparity between public opinion and economic reality. Key economic indicators such as GDP growth, low unemployment, and a robust stock market all point to a healthy state of the economy. However, a lot of individuals believe that they are living in a recession because of things like inflation, income disparity, and stagnant wages. This difference brings the need for a more comprehensive definition of what constitutes real economic health. Anyway, what do you think about the economic situation right now? Do you believe the narrative is more complex than the numbers alone? Please share your thoughts in the comment section below. And if you think this video was helpful, remember to give it a thumbs up. And for more videos like these, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell.